that forgiveness is for us, not for the person that hurt us.
Well, and here's the other thing about forgiveness. And that does sort of in a small way intertwine into the story. When it comes to forgiveness is not a one-time event.
No.
When someone has done something to you, your flesh is going to make sure. I always go back to when the disciples asked Jesus, well, how many times do we need to forgive them? 3 times or 7 times, whatever. And Jesus said, no, 70 times 7.
Yeah.
That means you forgive them for as many times as you have to.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Bookish Introverts podcast. Join host Amazon bestselling author Brett Nelson and avid reader Melanie Dyer as they dive in to review books they've read, then chat with the amazing authors behind them. Quiet minds, big bookshelves. You don't want to miss it.
Hey everyone, it's Brett and Jessica. We are here today to talk about another great book. And how are you?
I'm good.
For those of you who are watching or listening, you'll probably recognize Jessica. She had her first appearance on the podcast during our Redeeming Love. And so how do you feel about podcasting now that you're in your second attempt?
I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And then I enjoyed telling my friends and family, hey, I'm on a podcast, y'all.
Yeah.
Listen to this. It's cool.
Did people did people listen in?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
And I think they enjoyed it. But that was a book I loved talking about. I really enjoyed that discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I posted about this on my social media. It was really cool to find out that Francine Rivers saw that podcast. I mean,
that was awesome.
Never in a million years. So how cool was that?
That was so cool when you called me and I was like, what? No way.
Yeah. And I was so
a famous author. She listened to us talk about her book.
And I don't know how she found it. Because a lot of times when it comes to especially lesser known authors, if somebody discussed my book, one of my books in a podcast, I would want to know that because I'm very not well known as an author.
Yes.
And so when it comes to lesser known authors, I always try to reach, I'll reach out to them and send them the link and say, hey, if you want to watch or listen, we discussed your book, because for lesser known authors, that really would, I think, make authors' days. And the ones that I've reached out to, but I didn't for Francine Rivers because it's Francine Rivers.
Right.
I mean, she's probably been, she's been interviewed by big name, so I didn't hurt. So I don't know how she found us.
That is.
Yeah.
So cool.
And so when I got the email, I was like, okay, is this spam? But why would somebody?
Is this real?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was like, okay, I got to call Jessica and Melanie and tell them. Neither one of them answered their phone.
I called you back.
You did. You both called me back, but I'm like, big news and news.
Yeah. Oh, you got to tell someone.
Yeah. So, but I knew you especially would be excited because she's one of your favorite authors.
Yeah. That's my all-time favorite book.
Yeah.
Yes, that makes her my favorite author. Yes.
Not only is it your favorite author, but it's your favorite book. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, I can't remember what all we talked about with you before, because it was me and you and Melanie.
Right.
So I feel like we probably didn't talk to you as much. Have you read other Francine Rivers books beside that?
Well, I think you did ask me that question.
Did I ask
and
you that? Okay.
I'm like, what? I don't think I have. I think that's probably the only book of hers that I've read. So I can't say that I'm a super fan or
are you?
I probably would have read more than just one.
So I'm curious about that. Since you because typically when they love a book, they want to.
They're looking for other books that author.
Yeah. So
wrote.
Is there a part of you that maybe is fearful that you won't like her writing as well as you liked Redeeming Love? Or
no, it's not that at all. I'm just a weird person.
Oh, okay.
I just came across that book. I was going through a phase of just going to the library. I was living in Ozark, just a little small podunk town in Arkansas, but would go to the library and just check out a book. And my genre was Christian fiction.
Yeah.
Jeanette Oak or Okie.
Yeah.
One
of these days, I want to know how to pronounce her name.
Yeah. But a lot of her Love Comes Softly series was really good.
Uh-huh.
And I think there was Mail Order Bride series, those kinds of things, or Old West type frontier type books,
Yeah.
So I was just I don't know, I was just in this phase of like, I was just really into reading, and I would go get a book, take it back, get another one, read it, take it back, get another one. And I think it's just during that phase I was in, and I just came across that book, and I checked it out, read it, and I was just like, I just was so enamored by it. It just resonated with me. It spoke to me. It just struck a chord in me. And I just thought, and it just stuck with me, like, because that was probably 20 years ago or something when I first read it.
And I really hate to say this because I'm a very avid reader. I love to read, and I don't read as much as most people because I'm an author and I have a full-time job, but I generally can get in 4 to 6 books a month, depending on what's going on in any given month, but usually at least 4. Yeah, usually at minimum I can get 4 in. And I totally lost where I was going with that. I totally lost.
Well, I'll go through kind of phases.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm really into reading, and I just want to read book after book after book. And then I'll go for long periods of time and not read anything and not be interested in reading. Like,
okay.
And another series that I really liked was the Left Behind series.
Oh yeah. I've got the whole series.
Yes. Yeah. I was just so into that. I loved the way they wrote that.
And I still am. I love the Left Behind series. I interviewed a lady on the podcast, lovely lady, and she writes Left Behind style books.
Oh, okay.
And so we mentioned on the podcast that I mean, because really Left Behind was the books that started that genre. I don't remember there being Left Behind type books. Maybe there were a few here and there.
I don't recall there being books. Maybe there were, but I remember there were probably a few movies about the rapture.
Yeah.
Like
there was one with A.R. White that I really liked.
Yeah. Because I know there was at least a few kind of out there of depicting what it might be like during the rapture, and when the people that were left behind, what the reactions
were.
And
I love to watch movies and read books about how it could be on something that, because like, I love that, and
well, and I feel like, if you were raised up in church and in, Christian type world, you probably had an experience of like waking up from a nap and like, where's my parents? Like,
yes,
was I left behind? No!
Yes.
Or had a dream about it. Something like that.
I have thought that before. You wake up,
you just kind of have that like split second, like where, someone's not where they're supposed to be, like your mom's not in the kitchen cooking that, or something, or they're
just a little bit off.
And like, wait, where's so and so? And it's that moment of like,
it's
did rapture happen?
Not
left behind,
Yeah.
I mean, really, like growing up I was born in 1980, so growing up in like the 80s and the 90s. And that was talked about, I feel like, a lot. And then when did those Left Behind books come out? That was like early 2000s?
I can't even remember. Yeah.
Like late 90s or early 2000s?
Late 90s, early 2000s, yeah.
And I just feel like...
And that was back in the day when you literally, the day the book released or shortly thereafter, I would go buy it. And then you had to wait years. Readers today, they're so... We live in a microwave Netflix mentality.
Have to wait.
Yeah, Netflix drops a whole series at one time, and I feel like readers are kind of like that now. Like they get irritated if they have to wait, and I'm like, you can only push out books so fast.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, but back then, but really, there have been no major Left Behind books. Like Left Behind's the biggest ones. Now there have been some, and that was one thing that lady told me when I mentioned that I still, to this day, Left Behind is one of my favorite Left Behind books. And she said, "Oh, but it's so old." And and it is, and especially the technology in it. There's more technology now. The AI wasn't a thing back then and all that. And and her book did, but I'm like, in my mind, it's not old. It's
right. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago, does it?
Because the concept of it is still very...
Well, yeah, it's it's the same concept, no matter what decade, they wrote about it or made a movie about it.
Yeah.
It's the return of Christ and, the believers
and I know we're all
disappearing from the earth.
Yeah.
And what is the reaction of those that are left behind, and what did they think happened, and what, because obviously it talks about in the Bible events that will happen, after the rapture takes place.
And that's what I loved about the Left Behind books, because it delved into what do the 10 plagues look like? What do the 10 bowl judgments look like? The judge, like when you read that, it's almost reads like an allegory, and so it's like, that's what I loved about the Left Behind books, because it gave you almost a visceral, look at how that could happen.
Yeah. And I loved the characters. I loved the plot. I loved the character. Like they were endeared, to you. The like Buck Williams and
Zoe
Rayford.
Rayford, yeah.
I think it was Chloe.
Yeah.
But you were endeared to the characters, and it was just I think it was Tim LaHaye was one of the authors. It was like Tim LaHaye and there was another person. It was like 2 people, I think.
Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I feel like they were very good authors.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
loved their storytelling. I loved the characters. I loved the plot.
Yeah.
That was weaved throughout it. So,
yeah.
Just took you on a journey.
I really don't think there, that's coming to my mind. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Like, I don't think there has been any notable Left Behind style book since Left Behind.
Not that I recall.
Yeah.
And I mean, they made so many books. Like there was 12 or something.
And I think I remember seeing one of them in an interview. I can't remember which one of them it was, but I don't think originally there was supposed to be that many books in that series.
Really?
Yeah. Originally there was only supposed to be 4, but they wound up being such popular books, because at that time that was groundbreaking fiction. And so it wound up just they just wound up building on
and
it.
And they made movies.
And they made movies. Yeah.
Like 3.
Okay, now let's talk about that for a second. When it comes to the movies, there have been several variations of the Left Behind.
True.
You've got the Kirk Cameron version, and then Nicolas Cage came out with a version, and there may have even been another one. What's your favorite version of the movies?
Oh, hands down, Kirk Cameron.
Same.
Yeah, hands down, no competition.
Yeah, I remember being really excited. I think it was several years between the Kirk Cameron version and the Nicolas Cage.
Oh yeah.
Was the Nicolas Cage version the next one?
That's the only other one that I can think of.
Okay.
But it was based on the Left Behind book series. It was the same characters.
Yes.
I was so disappointed in that movie. I was so disappointed. Mostly because the entire movie only covers like the first chapter of that book, of like the first Left Behind book. It maybe just covers like the first chapter of that book. Yeah. But, like it leads up to, it's just basically leading up to the actual rapture happening. Yeah. And that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're just getting started. Like what?
Yeah. I did not like it at all. Like hands down, it's the Kirk Cameron version.
Oh, 100,000%. And I was so excited. I just remember those books again. I was so enthralled by them. I just couldn't. If I got my hands on one, I was just, reading it like crazy, and I loved it so much.
Yeah.
So because I was so into the books, when I heard that they were making a movie, I was so excited.
Oh, me too.
And I remember, I want to say I watched it for the first time. We were at like a youth camp or some type of a retreat. And because I was already an adult, but my sisters were teenagers, and I was kind of like a youth sponsor. And we went to this because it was I remember it was like cold weather. So it was like in the winter, like a winter retreat or something. We went to this place and they showed the movie. And so that was my first time seeing it. And I was just like glued to the screen. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah.
I thought they did well portraying the book.
They did.
In the movie.
Yeah.
In that one, not the Nicolas Cage one.
And no.
Basically, it's like chapter 1. Okay, that's what we're going to make a movie about, just chapter 1 of this book.
Well, and let's be honest, the first chapter's like, that's not even the most exciting part of the book.
Like, it just kind of like it ended before it even got started. I'm like, is this the entire movie?
And I don't even remember. I mean, this was how impressed I was with it. Like, was there another one after that first?
Not that I recall.
Another movie. So like,
just that one, I think.
Yeah. So Melanie and I have actually talked about doing the Left Behind book on the future podcast. I would like to do that. I was thinking maybe at some point it would be fun to do books that were made into movies.
Oh yeah.
It's sort of so anyway, so I think at some point we probably will do a Left Behind one.
Hey,
yeah.
I would include me in on that one. That would be a fun one.
Yeah.
I loved those books too. Those are right up there with redeeming love for me.
So what's your favorite style of book? I can't remember what we talked about with you. What's your favorite genre?
Well, like I said, my probably just kind of like Christian fiction romance type books. I'm, a hopeless romantic.
Like, are you a thriller mystery?
Well, and that's one thing we talked about, which is segue into the book that we're going to talk about, because I like mystery too.
Yeah.
And so really, when I was reading the book, I thought, I could actually just do without the romance element of this book, and let's just talk about the mystery, the cases that they were working on.
Yeah. So we're going to segue into that. We're going to talk. Tell them what we read.
Can we show it?
Yeah.
All right. Vanishing Point by Lisa Harris.
Yes. And I had heard of her. This was the first time I've ever read one of her books. And I was really... Mystery, thriller, suspense is my genre.
Okay.
I love... And I've been... And we haven't really read a lot of books for the podcast in that genre.
Okay.
Because... I told Melanie, I said, I really love that genre and I really want to read some books, but I feel like there's not as much room for discussion in books like that. Now, like with the Francine Rivers Redeeming Love, I mean, honestly, I think we could have kept going for 2 more hours.
We could have.
Because it's such deep, there's so much thing to talk about.
Thought-provoking, philosophical.
Yeah, and like with historical fiction, even though I'm not a fan of it, with historical fiction, with biblical fiction, I just feel like books in those genres are more conducive to conversation, because I like in the podcast, I like to not only discuss the book, but I also like to pull out and discuss stuff related to things we read in the book. And I just felt like and nothing against this author of this book, because I think it's just the genre in general. It's just not as conducive to discussion.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Right. We briefly talked about that before we started today. But yes. I kind of was thinking the same. I had the same thought when I'm reading the book. I'm like, what are we really going to talk about during this podcast?
Yeah. So,
but I mean, obviously there's, we will discuss the book, but I know what you're trying to say though, because there was like parallels to scripture, in the other book we were talking about, the Redeeming Love book. And you could kind of talk about, the parallel between this and that, and what you gleaned from it and things. So there's not, there's really not that in a book like this, but it was a good read. It was fun and suspenseful.
Well, and I really enjoyed this book. And before we get into it further, let's do just a little quick bio on Lisa Harris. She's a USA Today and CBA best-selling author. I'm not sure what CBA is. I think that's some sort of Christian bookseller.
Okay.
She's penned over 60 novels and novellas, including Christian romance, suspense, medical thrillers, and psychological thrillers. And again, those are all my jam. So I think we'll check out more of her books. Yeah. She's celebrated for crafting tight, adrenaline fueled plots, and she has sold nearly 1.5 million books. That's amazing. I can say as an author, like if you're not really super well known, it's hard to get people to buy your books, and so that's amazing.
Right.
Her accolades include a Christie Award for Dangerous Passage and Romantic Times Awards for Best Inspirational Suspense Novel, Blonde Covenant. I need to put my glasses on. Does that say blonde or bland?
Blood
Covenant and Vendetta. She's a travel junkie. She has lived on 4 continents and has spent 19 years as a missionary in Southern Africa.
Wow.
These experiences enrich her narratives, allowing her to incorporate unique and realistic settings into her action-packed stories. She lives in Texas with her husband and enjoys family time, cooking ethnic dishes, and gardening. So
I tell you what, I think is most impressive for me is the fact that she's lived on 4 different continents.
Yeah.
That's so impressive. I mean, how many people can say they've lived on really more than one continent?
I was going to say, I've only been on one continent.
Yeah, exactly.
So
to have lived, not just visited, but to have lived on 4 different continents, like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish more people had, kind of a broader experience. Like, I wish I had a broader experience. And,
yeah, that would be so nice. Yeah.
I don't get out much.
Not me either. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm just a homeboy.
Well, and if you didn't have to, I mean, if money wasn't an issue and you could just go and not have to pay for it.
Unfortunately,
then,
I'm
I'm
not in that tax bracket.
No, same. Like, who can afford to travel?
Yeah, especially in these days. But
oh gosh, yeah.
Oh well, the Lord's still good.
Oh yes, amen.
He's still good to us.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So, in general, did you like the book?
I did. There were times where I was like, okay, let's get on with it, a little bit. And it was kind of a little slow until the end, like the last, I don't know how many chapters. And it was like,
yeah.
It was like it went from like going like a easy 35 miles an hour to like, we're going 100.
Yeah.
And it's just like, my head is spinning.
Yeah.
So it really went from like a slow pace to just shooting out like a rocket, at the end, at the very end.
Yeah. Which is fine. I don't mind slower.
Like, what are you trying to do to me, lady?
Yeah. It's like you don't. Yeah, but it definitely is a slow burn.
Yes, but at the end, it's just like all cylinders on go.
Yeah, but even the slow parts, I even kind of enjoyed. So basically, what happens is the book opens with a man chasing a woman through the woods. You don't really know what's going on, and he, of course, you know that she's fighting for her life.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't want to be there with this guy, and he takes a picture of her with a Polaroid, and then the prologue ends. Hate a prologue. Like, absolutely, I've never had a prologue that I liked. But I mean, this one was an exciting one. I didn't hate this one,
and it was very short.
It was very short.
I like that she started it this way because it was from the perspective of the victim.
Yes.
So it's from her eyes,
and I think that's why I didn't hate it, because it was more action packed.
So then you think when you read that, you think, okay, well, this might be from her, like this book is probably from her perspective. No, we get a very small glimpse of that, and then it shifts gears.
Yes.
And then it's about basically the detectives that's on the case, because they found her dead, unfortunately.
They find her dead. Special Agent Garrett Addison is a criminal investigator. And in chapter 1, he's at the scene that includes a half-buried body, and beside the body
like a shallow grave.
A shallow grave.
And it does tell us it's the year 2004.
Yes.
That is kind of important because they do some time jumps.
They do some time jumps, which can be...
Threw me. The first one did. I was like, a year has passed? And then it was like, 10 years has passed?
Yeah.
What is going on?
Yeah, literally, like 15 or 20 years goes by in this book.
Yeah, during the span of this book. I'm like, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, it was different. And the funny thing is, like, I didn't realize when we read this book, this is the 4th book in the series. Yeah, so we're not like we're reading like there's 3 other books. Yeah, and I
noticed that there's a book after this. So I realize now that there is a series, because there's a book after this about Nikki Boyd.
Well, and the funny thing is, this on the cover it says it's a Nikki Boyd novel, but Nikki Boyd
they don't introduce her until way into it.
Yeah, so I'm like,
and I think the next book is about her.
Yeah,
so interesting.
Yeah, so anyway, I was like, but the good thing is, even though this was the 4th book in the series, I didn't realize that there were 3 before it. I didn't really feel like
you didn't feel like you'd missed.
I feel like it's kind of standalone-ish because I never found myself going, okay,
I feel like I'm missing some information.
Yeah. So
no, I didn't feel that way either.
Yeah. So I would.
So that's good to know.
I typically, when it comes to series, I like to read
in the order that they're written. Yes, I mean that makes sense.
I'm in a readers group, and people are constantly, I've got book 3 and blah 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 series, but I don't have the first 2 books. Is it okay to read? I'm like, no, read the first book. You don't even need to ask that. Just read
them in the right order.
Yeah, and sometimes, and apparently at least in this book, it wound up being okay. But still, if I had known, I probably would have had us read book 1 rather than book 4.
Realize.
Yeah,
not in either.
Yeah, but it actually turned out fine, and I really enjoyed the book. So we have Special Agent Garrett Addison. He's they found this girl, and he's taking crime scene photos. It's his first week on the job, and his dad is a senator. When I found this out, this was my first clue that there was going to be probably some sort of family dissension, because his dad was a senator.
Well, his dad's a lawyer. And so his granddad was a senator.
Oh, maybe he was. I wrote down
the dad for sure is a lawyer. I don't know if he was previously a senator and then
I wrote down that he was a previous senator and is now a lawyer in a family law firm. So
I'm wanting to say they said that the granddad was a senator.
Okay.
There's family money, there's family prestige.
Yes. And usually in books in any sort of book, if the dad is a lawyer or if the dad is a doctor or whatever, son is expected to follow in those footsteps. Well, and of course he because of his grandpa as a senator, because of his, apparently a lot of people say that Garrett has his position because of that connection. So that kind of bothers him a lot. And
yeah, it was pretty early on you find out that Garrett actually was a lawyer.
Yes.
So he was following in those footsteps. And then he decided he didn't want to be a lawyer anymore, and he wanted to be a cop.
And of course, Dad and Grandpa are not happy about this because they want him following in their footsteps. So there is a little bit of, it's really off the page drama. You don't really, that I can remember, I don't think you really had a lot of interaction with his parents.
There was one scene like way into the book where he does, he goes to visit his dad. His dad's like in town on a case,
that's right. Yeah.
And he visiting his dad and trying to maybe reconcile, because they're kind of estranged, obviously.
Yes.
And because the other character, main character is Jordan. She's an FBI agent.
Yes.
What's her Lambert? Jordan Lambert.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so she kind of encouraged him, I think, to go visit his dad to try to, it's like, well, it works both ways.
Yeah.
He's not reaching out to you. He's not trying to have a relationship with you, but neither are you trying to have one with him.
Somebody's got to let down their pride and start the ball rolling. Yeah.
But that's much later in the book.
Yeah, that's later in the book. So as he's taking crime photos, he sees something next to the body and finds that it's a Polaroid of the victim, which turns out to be sort of an MO of the abductor. They don't know, and he doesn't realize up until this point, when Garrett sees this, something sort of clicks in his mind, and he realizes that he has seen in previous cases. He's starting to see some connections. Yeah, and so he's like, I've seen this Polaroid thing, a pattern, and so that's when they finally realize, okay, I think we've got a serial killer on our hands here. Yep. So typically, what he kind of does some research, and he realizes, okay, all the victims that he's thinking about, they're young girls, 15, 16 years old. They have blonde hair. So they start getting a little bit of a MO on the guy. That's the common thread among them. So they realize they finally have a serial killer loose, and then Jordan Lambert, the book switches over to her. She's an FBI researcher in Quantico, Virginia. She's single, and so Riley, her partner, comes in and says, "Hey, I'm being sent to Nashville to deal with, which is where the victim is." And he was like, I want you to go with me. So anyway, and then we find out that's where she's from.
Yep. She has family there.
Yeah. So she's going back home.
Yes.
So of course she goes and she gets there. And this is where I had my first cringe in the book. Because she gets there, she gets to the crime scene, and she sees Garrett.
And
tell them about the connection between Garrett and Jordan.
Oh yes, well you knew they had to there had to be a connection there.
Of some kind.
So obviously she knew him from her past. They were in the police academy together and they dated.
Yes.
And so it kind of, you're hearing some of her reminiscings about it. I think some of his too, because the book does go back and forth from her perspective to his perspective.
It does, yeah.
And so they're both like, a lost love, kind of a lost opportunity, a missed opportunity, because they were dating, but they weren't like super serious. But I think they were both at a point of like falling for each other, but they hadn't like declared their love for one another.
Yeah.
And then she got an offer to go join the FBI. And so instead of him trying to stop her and say, no, don't go, stay here, I love you.
Or I love you and I'll go with you.
Yeah. Or her saying, hey, let's try to, or them trying to make it work long distance, or they just parted ways. It was kind of, I think it was amicable.
They kind of fizzled out. Yeah, there was no hate. Yeah, they just moved on.
Yeah, and so I think they were both, so it wasn't just like, they didn't have this long sordid past and this twisted kind of thing. It was just, they dated, they'd kind of fallen for each other, but never really confessed that to one another.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of, so there's little lingering feelings there, but it's just.
And when she saw him the first time and we got that little backstory, I was like, oh, this is going to be a romance.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't as big of a, it turned out not to be as big of a romance as I thought it was going to be, which was good, because for me, and this is just, I know there's a lot of people out there that want the more romance, the better. But for me, romance in a suspense book takes away from the suspense.
Yeah. And there were times, and again, it wasn't, I mean, the author did pretty good about kind of marrying the two.
Yeah.
But there were times where I'm like, I'm hooked into the suspense aspect of it now. Yes. Can we get back to that part? Like, what's happening with the case? I don't care about them taking a romantic walk or whatever.
And there was like one whole chapter, and it was a fairly long chapter of them just in a restaurant, and I'm just like, okay, fine, but can we get back to the suspense? Yeah.
Yes. I kind of had a few moments like that. Like, okay, let's fast forward through this romance stuff and get back to the Yeah. But again, it wasn't, I feel like it was a good balance all in all.
Yeah. Now, at first, I was just, because honestly, from some of the romantic suspense books that I read, and I knew going into it that it was the genre classification was romantic suspense. So I knew to expect it. Typically with books like this, it always turns out that it's very romance heavy, and the suspense part is like very minimal.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't really sure what to expect. And so in the beginning, it kind of felt like that was how it was going to be.
No.
But thankfully it turned out to not be, though. It was a very good balance. So I really appreciated it.
I feel like probably more, the balance tipped more in the suspense.
It did.
It was more the suspense aspect than the romance aspect.
Yeah. So if you're a reader who likes suspense books with minimal romance, this would be a good one to get. Yeah, definitely.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So they get there, they see each other, and while they're searching, the murder took place on a hiking trail in Nashville, and while they're checking the periphery of the place, he finds a beaded clutch, and it has a driver's license in it. So that's how they determine the identity of the person. And it turns out she disappeared 4 days ago while walking from her job at the coffee shop.
Yes.
So,
and they also determine pretty quickly, because Jordan is kind of like an analyst for the FBI, so she's not really a field agent.
Yes.
And she'll pour over data, and she's
kind of the brains behind that.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to mean that the people on the field are not, but she's more research, where they do the more hands-on.
And also, like,
which makes Jordan and Garrett a good team. A good team, yeah.
Because she's kind of like looking at the psychological aspect of a serial killer, and she's like, okay, this guy is meticulous.
She compiles the profile of the,
and it's like, this guy, he's meticulous, he's thorough, he's intelligent, and we're only finding what he wanted us to find.
Yeah.
And he's maybe playing games with us.
Yes. Yeah. So they go, they have to, once they find out who the victim is, of course, somebody has to have the unfortunate
go to the family.
Going to the family to let them know, because she's been missing for 4 days. So they get there and tell them, and the mom says, where was God when my girl was dying? Was he watching? If so, why didn't he stop her from being murdered? And we have had this conversation on so many of the podcasts, and I just, and we've all been through life experiences. It may not be something as extreme as a murder, but we've all been through experiences or known people who've been through experiences where that was the first word out of their mouth. Where was God? Why does God allow bad things to happen? And like, I've talked about that. So like, tell us what you think about stuff like that.
Well, and even like, and Jordan was the one that she was kind of asking this question to, and she really didn't have an answer for her. And that does kind of come back into play towards the end of the book. But, it's one of those things, and it's what they talked about too, how those like platitudes of,
because people don't know what to say.
You don't know what to say in those instances. And, like we live in a fallen world, and like, this is a sinful world, and things happen, and you can't help but kind of fall on those kind of platitudes. And it rains on the just and the unjust, and but even
there's really no answer that you can give anyone. At least,
and it's hard. It's tough. Like I had a coworker one time. Her husband passed away, and she's just like, I struggle with the why. Why did he have to pass away? Why did I have to lose him so soon? And you can't. There's no answer to that.
No,
it's like, I can't give you an answer to that. But it's like, I believe we're all appointed a time to die. And
exactly.
It's just, in talking about, why would God let this happen? And I think because God is ultimately,
especially to a teenage kid, because presumably they've got their whole life ahead of them. But unfortunately, sometimes God
is
God's
sovereign.
plan, is for
he's
them.
Omniscient, he's omnipresent. He's, he is in control. He is Almighty God, but he also is not. He's not a puppet master. He gives us free will. He gives us, so we can choose to live for him, or we can choose not to live for him. We can choose to do sinful things, or we can choose not to do sinful things.
And sometimes innocent people are the recipients of a bad person's free will.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we.
And another good book is the Shack. Have you ever read that?
Yeah. In fact, I just watched it.
And the movie is really good too.
Yeah. And there's a lot of hate for the Shack in the Christian community.
I love it. I'm sorry, I do. I love the book and I love the movie. But there's a scene where, because his little girl got abducted and murdered. They never found her body.
Yeah.
And so obviously he's struggling with this, years later, and he's still struggling with that. And so, and God is like, but even the bad people that do bad things, that they're still my children, and I still love them, and I still have hope for redemption for them too, and that's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. It's tough to think that God wants the best for that person that created this atrocity.
Yeah.
But he does. At the end of the day, God wants that serial killer to find him, find his way to him.
And it's crazy to think that they could have redemption. And that's not for us. And we're not, and that's the thing. And that was part of that kind of dialogue in that movie was, so you're the judge. You get to decide who's right and who's wrong, who gets to, you get to decide who's evil and who's good, who needs to be punished and who needs to be saved. And, and it's and then he in the movie, it showed his other two kids that are still living, and they appeared, and he was like, okay, one of them has to go to hell, the other one gets to go to heaven. You choose which one. He's like, well, I can't choose. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And he's like, exactly. And he's
and I think he even said, take me.
Yes, he did.
Let me be the one to go to hell for them. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And so it's just, and then, there's a scene in it where he's, and again, all of this is probably like a dream or what I'm saying, a vision or something that he's had. I don't know. But he ends up, they lead him to where he finds his daughter's body. And as he's carrying her body, and because leading up to that, he's like, you have to forgive. You have to be able to forgive the person that killed your daughter. Like, how could I even do that? You know? And so, and he's like carrying her body, and he's like, I forgive you. I forgive you, as he's carrying her lifeless body. It's just so powerful that forgiveness is for us, not for the person that hurt us.
Well, and here's the other thing about forgiveness. And that does sort of in a small way intertwine into the story. When it comes to forgiveness is not a one-time event.
No.
When someone has done something to you, or
rise back up again,
your flesh is going to make sure, you know, I always go back to, you know, when the disciples asked Jesus, well, how many times do we need to forgive them? 3 times or 7 times, whatever. And Jesus said, no, 70 times 7.
Yeah.
That means you forgive them for as many times as you have to.
Yeah. And that's hard. And when you keep getting, you know, I've experienced that, and that was so hard for me.
Who of us hasn't? If we're honest with ourselves, we all have
I had taken on so much offense, because it would be different if it was just a one-time incident. You know, that you said something, or you did something to hurt me that one time. I could forgive that and can get over that. But when it keeps happening, when you keep hurting me, you keep offending me. You know, that's what.
But you know, sometimes those one-time events can, depending on the severity of it, sometimes those can be.
Yeah, you can.
Those can be hard to forgive. You know, and that's why I say sometimes it's, you know, people. It's not a one-time event. You may have to forgive that person every day for a year, for 2 years, because Satan is a master at, you know,
bringing that back up again and rearing that ugly head of resentment and bitterness and unforgiveness.
And you know, there's a popular book by John Bevere. It's called The Bait of Satan, and it's about offense. And that's basically what the book is. You know, you can't take the bait of offense, you know? And so anyway, there are some moral dilemmas in the book about, you know, not only what's the FBI lady's name? Jordan. Not only with Jordan, but also with some of the victims. You know, the topic of forgiveness comes up. Why does God allow this? You know, why did this happen? Why did God, you know? And it's like,
well, and I mean, it's just one of, again, like, you know, we're not puppets, and he's not a puppet master. So he's not going to control every action that we do.
Yeah.
So, you know, if someone is evil and they're, you know, and their heart is hard and they don't have a conscience, and you know, maybe they have mental issues even, but
you know, and
you know, if they're going to go kill someone, like, you know, I mean, in a way, I think there are times that God might prevent something bad from, you know,
he absolutely does.
Like something could, you know, or guardian angel could step in and, you know, and save the day or something. I don't know. I think God does kind of step in and intervene at times.
And sometimes we recognize it, and sometimes we don't. You know, but there are times when, for whatever reasons, he chooses not to.
Right.
And in our humanness, we don't understand that. You know, we want an answer because we all know God is great. God is powerful. God can do anything.
Yeah.
And just because he doesn't, you know, I've heard people in my own life say, well, you know, I'm a Christian. I go to church. I do this. I do that. You know, so why did God not heal me? Why did God? But it doesn't make God any less powerful if he doesn't, you know. And I know that's easier said than done when you're not in the thick of it, you know, but God is powerful even when you don't get the result that you want.
Well, exactly. And I think, like, that's where the lesson lies.
That's where the lesson lies.
Is because it's during those difficult times, it's during the trials and the tribulations of your life that really, I mean, that's when God is working on you. That's when he's preparing you. That's when he's building character within you. Like, you know, if you go your entire life, never have any problems, nothing ever goes wrong, I mean, would you ever even need God?
No, you'd probably never give him a second
you wouldn't
thought.
need a savior. You wouldn't need a provider. You wouldn't need a protector. You wouldn't need, you know, well, think about Paul in the Bible. He said, I count it as joy that I've gone through these various trials and tribulations because, you know,
it produces character in you.
It does.
Yeah.
It produces fruit and it brings you closer to God. Like we were talking before we started the podcast, and I was talking about how my life has just been, maybe like I've struggled maybe lately just in life in general. And it just feels like if it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have any. That kind of thing, like just one thing after the next goes wrong, something breaks down or whatever. But it's just like, they're bringing me to a place of more dependence on God is what it's done. And I'm thankful for it. I'm starting to get to a place where I can like see it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And be like, you know what? I'm thankful for this because it's brought me closer to God and more dependence and more trust in God.
Yes. Well, and again, it's also a teaching experience for you, because in the moment you may not recognize, you may, because we all do the pity party thing. Why is this happening to me? Blah, 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 blah. I've done it. So I'm not.
Yes.
But when you get through it, sometimes it takes getting through it to see, to really have the clarity to see, okay, now I can see the provision of God through all this.
Yes.
Then when it happens again, you've got that. You're like, okay, you know what?
It's like, you know what?
I know I can rely on God.
God took care of me in that situation. He'll take care of me in this.
Exactly. And it does kind of produce growth in you.
Well, and also think about like there wouldn't even be a need for miracles to take place if something hadn't gone wrong to begin with. If there wasn't a bad situation to begin with, there wouldn't be a need of a miracle.
Exactly.
For God to come through in a mighty supernatural way
and show himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Reveal who he is as a miracle worker, as a promise keeper, as a provider and a protector.
I mean, ideally, we know God is without those sort of things, like I'm strong enough in my faith. I don't need signs and wonders to know that God is big, God is powerful, God is good. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's just kind of nice to see, just to see what God can do.
Exactly. Well, and and like, again, that's kind of been the journey I've been on lately in my life. And just kind of like, God put me and my husband in a season where it's like, okay, we're not, maybe just in a great place financially, and we're kind of on rocky ground, and that has stressed me out. Because you want that security and you want to feel like you're stable financially, and it's just like, and I've really had to be more dependent on God and I've had to let go of that, relinquish and let go of control of that, me being in control of that. God is saying, would you let me be in control of this? Will you let me be on the throne?
Because as humans, we like to be in control of our own lives.
And he's like,
and
will
it's
you
hard
trust
to relinquish that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And will you trust me to provide for you? Will you trust me to take care of you? And
he has.
And he has. And it's like, and there's times where I'm like, man, I worried about that for no good reason. And the scripture that just keeps coming to my mind, and God has, it's placed in my heart now, but it's saying, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God, and the God of peace, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's like time and time again in scripture, God tells us, do not be afraid, do not worry, do not fear, cast your cares on me. And it's like, there's a reason why it repeats that so many times in so many scriptures.
Yeah.
Because we have a tendency to take that on our shoulders, worry and anxiety and fear. And it's like, don't fear, don't worry, don't be anxious for anything, and it's like, but everything, take it to prayer. That's what that scripture is saying. Take everything to prayer, to God. Take it to God in prayer with thanksgiving. Have gratitude in your heart for the things that he's already done for you, but make your petition known to him. Don't just complain about it and worry about it. Pray about it.
Yes. Yeah. It's a good, and no matter how much you go through it, I think we all just need that reminder from time to time, because we're human. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so back to the book. So when they go to this family's house to talk to him, the dad comes in a little bit late, and he says, well, have you found him yet? So they're like, who? Found who? What are you talking about? And he goes, and he tells the person's name. He said, this is the guy that murdered my daughter.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that opens up
We're
a
like,
whole
what?
new conversation. We're not going to, since this is a mystery suspense type, we're not going to try our best not to give any spoilers. So he kind of gives, apparently the guy that he thinks killed his daughter, they've had some issues and
yes, it's a former like coworker or something.
yeah, I think they
or business partner.
A business partner, yeah. And like the guy slit the dad's tires.
Yeah, he lost a lot of money. Blames him.
So there's bad blood there.
Yes.
So of course, since they've had bad blood, his first thought is, well, if my daughter's been killed, this is the one who did it. You need to go get him.
Yeah.
So we're not going to say yes or no on that. So we'll just kind of glide past that. So after they talk to this guy, you know, they say, okay, we're going to check him out. So when Jordan and Garrett get back on their way, Quinn says, well, you know, I'm not sure if this guy is the right direction we need to look, because he doesn't fit he doesn't fit the profile
for the serial
killer. So, but of course, Garrett has a gut feeling, because, you know, a lot of times, you know, in books like this and in people in positions like this, it's more about their gut feeling, you know.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, they just didn't have a lot to go on.
No.
They did not have hardly any evidence, witnesses, like,
yeah.
I mean, because like as the book goes on, there are multiple girls, multiple abductions,
yeah.
And you're just not just about every time.
Yeah.
You're getting very little evidence, very little answers. Like, even if they have an eyewitness, they never saw the guy. They never, you know, and it's just, I can't imagine the frustration of like
for sure.
Jordan and Garrett, the people working on these cases, when you're just poring over the same information, trying to find something new, something different that sticks out to you that didn't before. But they just didn't have a lot to go by.
No, they didn't have a lot to go by. That kind of struck me when she said that, because one of the things that she said in her profile, this guy is not a perfectionist. The killer is a perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy that the father says is the killer, apparently she didn't think he was the killer because his shirt is wrinkled and there's a stain on his sleeve.
Right. And that's kind of her speciality.
Because her mind jumps to the profile, and you know, and so like, but in my mind, and of course I'm not, you know, but I'm like, okay, but if somebody's just murdered someone, I mean, that's a pretty significant thing that you've done in your life, that you know, and even when you murder someone, most people know that what they've done is wrong, you know. And I'm like, well, okay, so wouldn't the killer, even if they, and maybe it's because I'm not a perfectionist in that way, I like things done right, you know, but I'm not a major perfectionist, you know. And so like, maybe the fact that they killed somebody has squashed their perfection tendencies a little, and they don't care as much about their wrinkled shirt, because I don't know.
I mean, I understood what she was saying.
Yeah.
And like, well, you know, the kind of the MO, or the kind of psychology part of it.
Yes.
As far as if he's meticulous, he's thorough, you know, then he wouldn't be wearing a wrinkled shirt. It would be pressed and neat and or whatever.
And maybe perfectionist people are always perfectionists no matter what's going on, no matter how much stress.
You know what that reminded me of? Sherlock Holmes, where he sees those kind of details and he can tell something about you by looking at what you're wearing, or you know, or your shoes worn in that spot. So that means, like, I don't know. You know what I was saying?
Well, and I find that, you know, of course, you know, in movies that you watch, TV shows you watch, books you read, people like this tend to have like an intuition.
Yeah.
And I think there probably is something to that. I don't know how that works, but they do.
Well, I think she's been trained to look for those things, those idiosyncrasies.
To read the subtleties that a lot of people would miss.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, like a new, you know, a new mom that has a baby at home might have, you know, like a spit up stain on her shirt, and you can deduct that you have a newborn at home, you know, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think they pretty quickly decide that, I think the guy's name is Quinn, right?
Yeah.
That he's not the killer. They did question him. He was lying about because he said he didn't threaten him, and he did. He didn't.
Yeah.
He said, "No, I'm not the one that slit those tires," but he was.
It
So
turns
they
out-
got a confession out of him for like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I did those things, but I didn't murder his daughter, you know. And I think they pretty quickly realized, like, nah, this guy isn't the murderer.
Of course, for me, I'm thinking, okay, if you slash somebody's tires
and lied about it.
and lied about it,
that makes you look
and then
guilty.
you also find out at some point that somebody paid somebody for an alibi.
Yeah, that's right. He did.
Yeah,
he paid somebody
so
for an alibi. It's like,
there's-
okay,
there's
you're
a-
making yourself look really guilty.
Exactly.
Really guilty.
Yeah. So I'm like, honestly, like, I would, like, she did a real good job of like, because even though, and you had the duality of one of them thinking, okay, this could be the guy, and the other one, no, this is not the guy.
Yeah.
So
Those
like
two different opinions.
Yeah. So honestly, you kind of did go through the book, and there were several sort of red herrings throughout the book that it could have been, and
and she did a good job at throwing those in, I feel like, because you want to keep, I'm sure as an author she wants to keep you guessing.
Yeah, you want to
like,
keep people
who
guessing.
is the murderer? Do we have an idea of who that might be as a reader?
Yeah,
because I was trying to
that's
figure
what makes
that
it
out
interesting
as a
for us
reader.
as a reader. Yeah. So we find out throughout the book that some of the girls, they were witnessed getting into a car, which, most people are not going to do that. Granted, this takes place in the 2000s, but I think even in the 2000s, most people knew not to get in a car with a stranger. So that kind of opens up the is this a police officer? Is it?
Well, why are they getting in the car with someone they don't know? Because that was a theme of the parents, the friends were like, she would never do that. She would never get in the car of a stranger. There would be no reason for her to.
Yeah.
So what is this person telling them to get them in the car willingly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was kind of that aspect of it. You didn't really know.
Yeah.
And again, like,
and
there's
some of the
so
girls,
many
like,
unanswered questions.
yeah, which is what makes the book interesting, because that's what makes you want to keep reading. And some of the girls they found out, had reported to their friends that they felt like they were being followed.
Yeah.
That
was a recurring theme.
Yeah, that was sort of a recurring thing. So there's that brings up the question: were they targeted? A lot of the part of the book is just trying to find out who this person is.
Well, and I think right about now is when we have the first time jump.
Thanks for joining us on the Bookish Introverts podcast, where together we explore the worlds within the pages. Until next time, stay bookish.